Hello and welcome, phenomenal people. Back to the Greek word phenomenal, appearing to view, to show, being rendered in English. I tend to wait to make videos, usually at least a couple of weeks or a month or sometimes even longer. Often out of busyness or just to allow the ideas that come my way to come my way and myself to play around with them and get to understand them better before I go on speaking about them. And I think it is incumbent that anybody speaking on ideas do that and try their best not to speak prematurely. At any rate, I said in my last video that I'm new to phenomenology, and in a sense I've been practicing the phenomenological epoche of Husserl for quite some time, but it was confessedly a bit unwitting, that is, done without my really concretely knowing it. And the simple donation of a word to a, say, act of perception goes a long way in making it replicable and being able to use it as a tool in a reliable way. And so without that word of Husserl, there was something missing, while nevertheless through, as I said before, my meditation practice, I have had some of the insights that are well known to the literati of phenomenology and the people who read it. There is an experience to meditation, and there's also a value to it. And in the last video I talked about the value, and here I would like to distinguish the experience from that, because really the fact that meditation has a value at all is owing to the experience of it. It seems, in a strange sense, to tell you something fundamental about the reality that you live. And I'd like to unpack that a little. Don't mind the pipe, it's just tobacco, friends. And that thing that is told you, at least this is how I have understood it, has at least a little something to do with the nature of self. And if you practice meditation long enough, or speak to people who have, or even, I would say, spend time on your own and reflect on your own, go into nature and leave behind all that people have told you about what you are, what reality is, what you're supposed to be doing, and try to return to this innocent and naked perspective, such that you can learn from life what life really is, as opposed to learn from teachers and parents and society and even philosophers. And even I would say from religions, there are people with different, very radically different opinions on this, but the way I see it is there are two types of people, and I hate to dichotomize, there are plenty of dichotomies already, but there are those who seem to think that people require to be told by other people or humanistic figures, by which I mean prophets or divine men or anything like that, whatever the case may be, simply humans or extra human humans, there's got to be some human to tell you what you are meant to do, and all of that stuff. While there's another type of person who maybe, for whatever reason, has learned to be a little bit mistrustful of other people, knowing their proclivity to make naive assertions, irreversible naive assertions, the devotion to which and the faith in which can utterly blind you to things as they are. And with these assertions and claims about reality, one's ears to reality are closed, and you think it's a solved riddle, and you're not anymore paying any heed or taking in the data that come your way and present themselves to you in solitude. And so there's my spiel on the two different types of people. And so before, or maybe during, one's getting into meditation, one has to decide whether one is the other or the other. Which of the two are you? And some people are properly fitted under the first. I like to think of myself as the one who doesn't want to be told by anybody except for life itself how to live life and what life is. And then there are others who it's just people. What strikes me about people is the individuality of all of them, and I'm not condemning those who ascribe a lot of value to men's interpretations of existence and all of that. But there is something very uncanny, I think, about the tendency to want to trap other people in interpretations that you hold. And you see this a lot, and it's terrifying how much you see it. And yet it does serve some kind of function, I think, but whether that function is really good is debatable, and this is where you find people gravitating to the different personality types I described. And the experience of meditation brings you to the nudity of the phenomena, the showing, the appearing to view, such as it is. You'll probably notice me speaking more in phenomenological language in my later videos from now on for a while, because there's something so coherent to the nature of reality about the language of phenomenology, is that it doesn't try to engulf it in some all-encompassing statements about what it is. It just participates in the isness. It just goes with that fluctuation and spontaneity which is the unfolding character of life. And I can think of a few people with whom I'm actually great friends who, hearing the sorts of words I am saying, would think, this is utterly crazy. I mean, nobody can live like that. Just thinking, nothing is permanent, there's nothing you can really rely on, put your faith in, there's no solidity or insurance for your soul, which you can find for yourself and thus protect yourself from the unpredictable changes that occur in life, which, as a matter of fact, do stand to take you out. And, well, I argue rather that there is some kind of insurance in this phenomenological or meditative view of life, which takes the phenomenon in its nudity and doesn't impose all-encompassing interpretations on it, but is strictly available to what is, such as it is. And this was I have a couple of conspiracies that I would like to talk about in this video. One is the idea of the self, and the other is the equally widespread notion that things are not as they should be, or that things could be better, could be differently, and there has to be somebody, someone to correct it, correct life, because it's insufficient as it is. And I am somebody who, paying attention to the tragedies and devastations of life, granted, having not really experienced them too intensely, I've lived a pretty stable and average life, all things considered. Still, taking into consideration all of the disappointments that life has to offer, I think that to pass a comprehensive statement on life saying that it's all bad because, say, the Holocaust occurred, or 9/11 occurred, or people get murdered in cities every day, kill each other's children with laced drugs, and rape people. I could just go on, and it's making me sick thinking about it. And yet, I think that it is a sort of choice to fixate on that chapter of reality at the expense of what before I called the beatific vision, the fullness of life, the inexhaustibility of life. It is so possible to have fresh and new eyes for everything, and I thoroughly believe that. And this is kind of sort of the insight that's driving me to make all these videos lately, is because on a certain level I always knew it, and I always craved that freshness and that childlike enthusiasm for things, and yet I hadn't yet encountered enough of the excellent minds of our history, which I have managed to do now, owing to some new book reading, who were themselves directly concerned with this absolutely pivotal way of approaching life, in that if you can not overlook all of that which the mass of men tend to overlook, then the way I see it is you have acquired a kind of invincibility to circumstance. It doesn't matter where you find yourself, because you do not, to your detriment, fixate on all of those toxic possible objects of fixation that, you know, if you do think too much about 9/11, if you do think too much about people killing themselves, all of these admittedly terrible things that go on in life, well then of course you're going to feel like shit and pass sweeping assertions and say that life really is bad and that it shouldn't have happened, a la Schopenhauer. And I'm not with that club. I see what has happened in life's history, and that there are quite a few things I can think of that are just downright awful. And so, to bring this back to the experience of meditation, because I kind of went in a different direction there for a few minutes. I like to think that in meditation, you watch the life drama carry itself out perfectly inside your solitary consciousness. That really, the general structure remains the same. All of the horrors and atrocities that occur in the world, in a certain respect, occur with your thought. All of those inner acts that you perceive when, say, you close your eyes. And that the beatific vision as well, the certainty about life's fecundity, and that there are many vistas and many avenues to be explored, and that in childhood we had fresh eyes for these and were available to these, open to these, ready for them. And then we grow older, we grow mature, and I like to think that we actually become, in that same motion, a great deal less mature, in that we have really lost something in losing these eyes for splendor in life. That, however one can attain to it, by meditation or not, there is inestimable value in the ability to see things for what they are as clearly as you possibly can, because when you can get to that level of attention and consciousness, things, as I said, even the ugly, even what you hate, can become interesting again. And you are not defeated by circumstance, but being available to it, you have optimized it and paid it the attention it wanted. I really think that there is a transformative occurrence that occurs with this. Just the mere looking at life the way it wants to be looked at. Here's another conspiracy for you. That those who are driven to go to therapy or are taking pharmaceuticals for the stability and good of their mind and soul have simply fallen into a wrong way of seeing the world. It's not that their circumstance is incorrect and should be otherwise. They got a bad lot by nature or God, what have you. But it has been their shortcoming in failing to see what life wants them to see and how it wants them to see. And this has always been a kind of unconscious conviction of mine, that there is an art of seeing, and that very few come to even think of it, let alone master it. But just the idea that it is possible to master, that you don't have to be brought down by poor interpretations and delusions which want to keep you in despair, but having understood the blisses and the horrors of your solitary inner experience, you are able to appreciate life, that it happened at all, that you're in it, and that you are inseparable from it. And all of our illusions about separation, isolation from the whole, are but illusions, that you are continuous with the phenomenon of life. And that nothing can sever you from that but a wrong way of seeing. And it's got a little bit more emotional than I had expected, but this is what the experience of years of meditation has seemed like to me, is a drawn-out process of learning to see better, more accurately, more comprehensively. And what people call seeing deeply, or being mystical, is maybe just an attribution to someone who has for himself really and earnestly tried to learn to see things for what they are. Alright, to build on this conspiracy of the idea that life is wrong and that it has to be corrected, let me think on that for a moment. What I could think of there is that and it goes with the sense of self, my other conspiracy there, which has strengthened lately, is that in this conclusion that life is wrong and that it needs to be bettered, ameliorated, changed somehow, there is a sense of self, and with that sense of self, it is a sense of victimization, and this victimization would seem to result from a personal fixation on all the wrong things, and thus a seeing wrongly. In meditation practice, you get to see yourself seeing wrongly. That's the beginning. In Jung's alchemy, this is called the negredo, the blackness. And one might venture to say that there's quite a lot of people who live in blackness, and it's not their fault, but they have this illusion of isolation and separation, as I had said before. They have not made a conscious connection with the life they participate in, and tried to learn how to see it properly for what it is. Because by doing that, well, it makes living quite a lot easier, because you get to see just how natural it is, and effective it is. We go to bed every night and the nature game keeps going. Even in our sleep, in us, in our bodies, in our minds, the whole thing keeps going. And in the Jungian opus, you're learning to see into what he calls the unconscious, into the invisible world that the religious man believes, the realm of the dead. And this is something like the trying waters of insight that appear first in the form of a blackness and a threat and a danger. It's all of this negative reading of life and fixating on the devil, in so many words. But with practice, you get to learn the untenability of maintaining such a position toward life. And you thus are required to achieve a state of awareness that comprehends that darkness, and yet which also ventures into the realm of its opposite, which is the insights themselves. And these are the so-called gems of the unconscious. And anybody practicing meditation, or even just spending time in solitude reflecting, will find themselves, if they get past the blackness and aren't deceived and brought down by it, to see the light. And that marks a new development in your lived experience and consciousness, and it opens up so many possibilities for you. You can now, seeing life for what it is in all of its greatness, contribute to the greatness of it in the spirit of life which you have learned in contemplation. And that's really, I think, the essence of meditation, is that you have reduced yourself in a weird way to nothing. You're sitting down, you're alone, or however you're doing the meditation, and it's just you and the world and the life force speaking in you, and there's nobody around to tell you what to do, how to be, or any of that. It's this pure participation in life, which can be hindered in daily life if you spend too much time with people who haven't reached that sort of experience and are aware of the possible joys and states that we can attain to if only we would open our minds and sensitivities up past the realm of the dreary and regrettable and sad and black, and get to the albedo, the whiteness, because so they say white comprehends black. It comprehends all the colors, rather. It contains all of the colors, and I think maybe just our becoming aware that there are other colors, and you don't have to imprison yourself to all the false ones, then that changes everything for the life of a person. And I've been kind of a loner in my younger years, but all things considered, I don't really regret it, because it enabled me to learn this seeing thing, that it actually matters, and it is a true possible development in human beings, and that we're more to execute this process properly then we could see some very talented and creative individuals who have, as I put it, returned to the nudity of the phenomenon of life, or the nudity to all phenomena, and haven't taken their lessons from somebody else and clung so tightly to an interpretation of existence that being so infatuated with it, you have to impose it onto other people who want nothing to do with it and think that there could be better interpretations and that there might be something wrong or constraining to the one that that person has, who, by the way, is trying to shove it onto you. I'm sorry, but this is a tendency that has always very much frustrated me, and in that respect, I am thoroughly modern. But modernity itself marks a new opening and possibility for the individual, because that anti-tendency to the tendency to enslave others that I said I have, and which I called modern, that a lot of people explain it owing to the popularity of the natural sciences, but that tendency has itself gained some ground, and people want to be free thinkers and not to be enslaved by other people. And that itself, it's dangerous, I would say, at first, because if you have an active mind and you're if you're dealing with some serious questions and feelings, you may lose your bearings. Sorry, there's a cicada flying around me, scaring me. You may lose your bearings on reality for a while and be pretty confused. That's a challenging stage, which is very common in the beginning of the alchemical work. And so it's dangerous, this development that we have made as a people. But a world of free thinkers, which is to say of people who have not taken their lessons from other people and are trying to pay it forward by enslaving other people and coming generations to a self-same interpretation of life. We can open up whole new horizons. And man really is our great mystery. I mean, we are him, but to say that we know what he is incredibly naive. And I think that through radical self-study, as Husserl puts it, which amounts to suspending your judgment toward all phenomena, and basically in that same motion disidentifying from what for your whole life you have experienced to be as yourself, disidentifying from that, and instead situating yourself into this absolute consciousness, which this itself, the absolute consciousness or absolute ego, that Husserl describes in the Paris lectures on Descartes. This is something that has been spoken of in ancient religious traditions as being basically the great religious attainment, is a kind of detachment from the world, from the particulars of circumstance, and instead living in an absolute perspective. That's basically the teaching of phenomenology, and this was the soteriology, the salvation of, for instance, Buddhism and Christianity and the Tao, and probably plenty more. And so to think that phenomenology has created a method for what historically has been a pinnacle religious attainment for the individual in his solitude is very, very exciting. It's basically an opening up to a religious, i.e. a meaningful experience of life for all individuals, regardless of religion, meaning you don't have to affiliate with any certain one to attain to this proper way of looking at life and being in it. And this is what I mean by the alchemical opus, the work, as Jung calls it. It's learning how to see, because in the end, how you see more or less determines your fate. And you have to ask yourself, I mean, there's always going to be chance occurrences, but leaving those aside, what kind of fate do you want for yourself? And would you rather have a rich life or a poor one? And just to think about the difference between those things, and to observe where others go wrong, where you go wrong, and to try to adopt a comprehensive perspective. This all goes a very long way, and I encourage anybody to do it, though it may be a struggle and quite lonely. But once you realize what I mentioned before, what is told you in the meditative experience about the nature of the self, then you realize that you're never alone, and that, you're in good hands, in spite of all of the evidence people will bring up to you to the contrary. But that, from the grand perspective, life is pretty good. So I'm gonna go.